Hi, I'm Matt from the Loom of Time.
I'm Shieldsy from Avocatus.
And welcome to the Tomb of Lime podcast. Episode 14, the XIV. That's correct, right? At some point, I'm going to run out of Roman numerals that I know how to do, and then just...
We'll work through it together,
I'll have
mate.
to look that up, just put in some random letters there.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, episode 14, we're going to be looking at the shoulders of giants, a blast from the past. How you doing, Nick?
Yeah, good, man.
Yeah.
Nice.
We got our wine again,
Yep.
so we're still learning.
I think we've found a thing.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, so far so good.
All right, I'll jump right in. I wanted to talk to you today about originality in music. Yeah, okay. So here, I'll hit you with some theory that I've developed over this last 24 hours or whatever about originality. And that is, I think, there's maybe three kinds of originality that are relevant to, what we're worried about. All right?
Right.
Here we go. All right. The first one is what I would call true originality, where the artist or whatever is doing something that has never been heard before. All right?
Right.
And we've got something I would call maybe personal or local originality, which is where you're hearing something that an artist doing that you've never heard before. It's original for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third type I'm going to call evolution, which is like the artist is doing something that they've never done before.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Now, with those three things in mind, which I suppose for any one person, when you hear a piece of music, it could be one or two or all three of those things at once, necessarily. But is there some element of originality that is desirable in music or important in music? Is there something that is something you look for? And is there something that you should strive for if you're making music when it comes to originality?
Well, straight away, I think there isn't much originality left, right?
What we'll call true originality.
What we'll call true originality. And I think originality now comes from innovation. And it might be from like taking a thing that already exists and just changing it either a little bit or a lot to make an original thing. Difficult to do because someone will find it and find what it's, the same as or whether or not like it's a fine line between like a copy and an inspiration.
There's a guy on the internet, I forget what his name is, but he's, I would say, somewhat obsessed with H.R. Giger, the guy that did the artwork for Milana Kazmata, the Triptychon albums, but also he designed the alien from Alien and all that lovely things. And his shtick is like investigating the kind of inspiration for every piece of work that he did. Okay. So he'll try and find references in magazines and photos and things from the time that those paintings were painted and so on, and go, here, this must have been a reference for him or must have been in his mind, even subconsciously while he was making it. And some of them I'm just like, I don't see it. But,
Well, inspiration can take many forms, right? It doesn't need to necessarily be a copy.
No, sure.
Or even resemble what it was, but some sort of inspiration. Now, if you're going to reverse engineer that, like this guy you're saying is doing, that could be pretty obscure, right?
Yes.
Especially if he can show you and say, this is the inspiration for that thing. It's like, yeah, sure, mate.
Often I look at those and I go, yeah, okay, I see the similarity.
Yeah.
But is it necessarily the case that they inspired that, or is it a coincidence that they look similar? Because that seems to be possible as well. Right?
Yeah.
I think, in history, sometimes two people have come up with the same scientific equation or whatever, and then there's an argument over who gets to name it after themselves or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And they seem to have done it totally independently. So yes, I think you can always sort of trace almost what someone's done to something that's happened before. And so it's, if not never the case, very rare that we get true originality. I mean, does it happen? Do you think we get true originality these days, or is it never the case, do you think?
It would never be the case, but I guess, does it make, do you tire of looking for it?
Maybe.
If you were actually looking for it, or if you stumble across it. I can't remember the last time I stumbled across something that seemed truly original.
Yeah.
Like, let's take music, for example, because that's what we talk most about. Something that's original might be just something that's very different from what you'd heard that person do before, or you hadn't heard anything like it before. But you will draw similarities to something else naturally.
It's even when you do find something that you might even think might be truly original, it's not 100% truly original. Like every part of it is different from anything you've ever heard.
Sure.
It's almost like you find one element among many.
It'll be one element. Yeah. It can't. Yeah.
And even then we're not sure. And it's something I've just thought about while we're thinking about it. If something was discovered, or done in a piece of art, and then it was lost to time and forgotten, and then there's no one alive who's ever heard it, and then someone else does it in the future, is that truly original? Because, I mean, they could not have had an inspiration from it, but they've rediscovered the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's original. It comes in, like, when you hear about these, like, lawsuits in music around, plagiarism and whatnot.
Yep.
To say that one person copied another person's thing may be the case. It might not be the case. It might be that they've just come up with the same thing. There's only so many different combinations of 4 chords you can do, and whether or not you've subconsciously heard it. I think there was something about a Beatles song.
Yeah. I'm sure we talked about...
Yeah, we talked about this, didn't we?
My Sweet Woman or something.
Something anyway. And Led Zeppelin went through the same thing too with Stairway to Heaven.
Yep. Yes.
But I can't remember who that was alleged to be copied from.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if anyone cares, do they?
Well, I think they try and sue like 20, 30, 40 years after the fact or something? I don't know.
Maybe they were just, sitting around drinking a glass of wine going, man.
That sounds familiar.
Those bastards. I'll take them for all they were.
Or, is it like, is it in that case, could you be like, wow, these guys are making millions off this. I should let them make as many millions as I can before I...
And then go after them, yeah. Rather than shut them down and give them the whole, like, cease and desist right up front.
Yeah.
That's mine. But take it and run with it. It's not always the case, right? Sometimes it can be copied. Sometimes it's just 2 completely separate artists can be inspired by the same thing.
Yes.
Not necessarily by each other.
Yep.
But by the same thing.
Yep.
2 different bands are making songs about ancient Rome.
Yeah.
Not necessarily copying the other band, but just telling stories about ancient Rome.
That sometimes is a useful thing because, there are bands that are heavily influenced by, say, one artist. And you can listen to 2 bands who are heavily influenced by one artist, and then you can tell which parts have taken from those influences. Exactly. And you can because of the contrast, you can tell which parts are not taken from that artist.
Yep.
And it kind of, you can sort of almost weed out what was the influence and what might be an original injection or inspired from somewhere else at the very least. And something I have noticed is that some bands actually wear the plagiaristic kind of intent on their sleeve, as it were. There are things, bands, I think the phenomenon of the carcass clone, the gore grind bands that worship at Carcass's feet. And oftentimes, with some of them at least, they actually... It's a note of pride that they've copied Carcass to a T, and that they kind of advertise that, they're just like Carcass. I feel like General Surgery is a Carcass clone that are like, we're a Carcass clone. Yeah. And I think County Medical Examiners, I think they were called. I think they even said,
this is cookie cutter stuff, right?
Yeah. But they're like, yes, this is what we're doing. This is the project. We love that grind era of Carcass, the gore grind thing. Yeah. And we wanna be like
we're in on it.
Yeah. Like now that I've listened to a lot more of the band Death, I can hear it when I hear it in other bands.
Oh,
and
yes.
I wasn't aware of it before I'd listened to that catalogue.
Yep.
And
so much more stuff made sense after you listened to Death.
Yeah, well, I guess so. Yeah, much more stuff made sense where it came from.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's as many bands being like, we're a Death clone. It's almost like we...
Not on purpose.
Yeah, not on purpose.
Not on their sleeve anyway.
Not on their sleeve, yeah. But at the same time, paying homage is one thing, and I don't know, is paying homage and ripping someone off the same, different? I don't know.
It's not the same. They are, different. I think the paying homage is, I don't know, seems more respectful. Maybe it's just because it's a fancier word than copying or ripping someone off,
So you think, the homage is, the intent is different.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's intended that you know that it's an homage, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess.
Whereas ripping off someone is claiming that it's an original work by you, and perhaps you just are as good as the person you're ripping off. Something like that. So okay. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things going on here. When it comes to originality, then for you in the music that you choose to listen to, do you find that when you discover something that you like, it is because it has some amount of originality, or is that a prerequisite for you?
It's not a prerequisite, and I certainly don't shy away from a homage, let's say, or an obvious inspiration. I can't say that I can think of an example of where a band has worn it on their sleeve, except for the fact, like, if there is an homage or a rip-off that is so blatantly ripped off, like they've borrowed so much stuff and have it, like, you know, like, can I borrow your homework? Just make sure you change it up a little bit so it doesn't look like we're copying. When you notice that, kind of makes you giggle.
You
know, how do they think they can get away with that? Or surely they've been called out on that, you know?
And sometimes it's just like, yeah, we know. And sometimes it's just like, this belongs to the genre almost. It's not, it doesn't belong to any one person, you know?
Yeah, this is not mine. This is not my material. This is the genre's material.
Something like that.
I'm just, doing it for you.
Yeah. Like, I know you can almost immediately tell when someone's influenced by Entombed if they're getting that Swedish buzzsaw sound out. Because, I'm sure it happens in a lot of genres, but metal in particular, when it comes to guitar tone, is a place where you can reference historical albums, as it were. And there's a well of things on YouTube where people are just trying to recreate the tones of certain albums. That's a thing. And so that is something that's an area it seems particular in a lot of ways to our kind of music, where people can take specific inspiration in that they want to actually literally sound like this other band, not just
as close as possible,
not just write like them or whatever,
Talking of plagiarism and copyright and that kind of stuff, and I'd love to know more about this, but my very basic understanding is when you are going to cover a Queen song, that there is a rule, like an actual written rule, a legal requirement, that if you're going to publish a Queen cover, it has to be exactly the same as the original, like as close as you can get. So
they've stipulated, as part of their legacy, whatever, you can cover these under these circumstances. Now that I think about it, I can't think of many like a lot of bands covering Queen songs, and you think as a band as influential Queen
and so popular
that there would be covers all over the place, but it's not coming to my. I'm sure there's examples.
So one specific example, and the reason I know about this, the band or the project, whatever you want to call it, Pussifer. By Maynard James Keenan. They did a cover of Bohemian Rhapsody. Of all songs.
Big boy.
Excellent cover. Excellent version of it. And Maynard has been known to make covers. He's got entire albums of covers in his back catalogue where he goes wildly off the path of the original.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess he might have wanted to do that with Queen. And maybe he did make one. And whoever was representing Queen, maybe even Queen themselves, have said, no, you can't do that.
It's not how we do things.
Do it again. And then so subsequently they published a version of Bohemian Rhapsody that is like really similar.
Okay.
You can pick his voice, right?
Yeah.
It's not Freddie.
No,
it's Maynard.
Sure.
They both have very distinctive voices.
I guess there's two kinds of artistry there, really, is trying to get as close to the original as possible, and the other way around is trying to inject originality into, because the covers game isn't generally about getting as close to the original as possible.
Well, that's a covers game.
Yeah.
That's one facet of it, right?
Oh, yeah. Now that I think about it, there are bands that, they're the tribute show.
This is how you make money at the pub as a band.
Show. Right, yeah.
Play the Angels as accurately as you can. People will love it.
Yeah. And it goes beyond that. The bands that... are looking for guitarists that look like the guitarist from the original.
That's a thing too. Yeah.
So yes, there is definitely the market of the cover where it is trying to be as close to the original, and I guess there is also the market of covers where it is it's desirable to reinterpret the cover so that it's not. Yeah, it's a different audience, I suppose.
What about, I don't know much about them, but another band, an example of homage, I guess, versus rip-off, but a band called Greta Van Fleet. You know about this band?
I know about this band. I don't think I've ever heard one of their songs before, but they've gotten a notoriety.
They do, particularly when they first sort of emerged, because the whole sound, the whole image, the whole everything. Man, when I first heard it, and I wasn't sure that I knew that I heard it, like what I was hearing at the time, but if you told me, like, oh man, this is a new Led Zeppelin song, previously unreleased, I'd be like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, okay.
It's exactly the same, man.
Wow, that close. I mean,
it's ridiculous.
I know that the internet tends to exaggerate things sometimes, but so it's
like it's believable.
Guitar tone and vocal delivery and
the whole bit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they did a very good job, and that's not just like find another example that's just homage to a style like Wolf Mother or something like that, like a modern version of or what's another example like Jet. You know, they're newer, you know, they're not from the 80s or the 70s, but they are doing that thing. Greta Van Fleet took it to a whole new level.
Okay.
It's just like, okay, we're going to be Led Zeppelin tribute band.
And I wouldn't have thought that a band that was doing that kind of thing would have been able to get that popular, though. This was a popular act, right? There are kinds of people who don't want the bands that they like to change from album to album. They just want new material in the same style.
More of the same stuff.
It's novel in that it's not the same songs over and over again because I've gotten bored of that old stuff.
Yeah.
But it inspires the same emotions or whatever it is. And in a way, you know, I've seen people talk about how psychologically some people like to watch the same TV show over and over again as a sense of, you know, it's grounding and it helps them, it comforts them in some way, you know. I think it's The Office's, you know, the US Office show has become that touchstone for a lot of people. And
do you have a show like that?
No, I don't know if
What's one show that you've watched like back to back over and over and over?
I don't know if I've watched a television show. I reckon it would probably be something like Futurama, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think I watched a lot of that when I was younger. And I reckon it would be pretty comforting to just stick that on and just sit there and watch it. Yeah,
I reckon for me, it's probably The Mighty Boosh.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just watching it over and over again. Years ago.
Yes, yeah.
And more recently, probably like Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, yeah.
It's something completely ridiculous.
Yes, yeah.
But it's just a great bit of fun.
I can see that show having that quality, actually, you get to know the characters and then, And likewise, it's the same with music. And, you know, I'm sure the same way we have albums that we just stick on.
You just chuck on because it's so great.
Or nostalgic or whatever.
Yeah, we talked about it before.
Yeah. So when it comes to originality, there are plenty of markets where it is undesirable or not desirable to have it, or just enough, a very slim amount of it, such that it's not simply just listening to something you've heard before. I guess that's because the more novel and original something is, I guess the more challenging it is to listen to digest, to grapple with and grasp. Whereas if you're getting something that's not just the same ingredient, songs that you've heard before, but just slightly different, it's novel enough to keep you interested, but it's not so novel that it challenges you in any way.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So it's still got that comfort zone feeling to it. And, you know, this might be one of those things we were talking about last week, when you're in the mood for something that's just easy to listen to.
Easily digestible, whether or not it's just like a gradual change. When you're chasing the evolution in the music that you're listening to, that's how you get to extreme metal. It didn't all happen at once, right? It wasn't just like, oh, bang, I listen to, you know, depressive, suicidal black metal now. It's you get there in certain stages.
Like if you did listen to the first few rock bands that you'd ever heard, never heard metal in your life, and go, man, I like original stuff in my music. I wish I could hear a band that was original in every way and had stylistic stuff at every level that I had never heard. And then it's like, oh, here, listen to this. And they brought the most extreme kind of heavy metal. And you'd be like, it doesn't tend to work out like that. And that's probably for a reason. I don't think anyone does chase that much originality. They need a through line. They need some reference point. Yes, that they can follow through, so that so they can understand it really. You know? It's almost like when you come across a word you've never heard before and you're like, oh, that's an interesting word. Yeah. But if you're stuck somewhere where everyone's talking a language you don't understand at all, you're just like, well, you're totally lost.
You can't learn Japanese just by going to Japan. No. There's more work to do than that.
Probably, yes. Yeah. And especially if it's not there's no reference to what the person is talking about, right? If you were just hearing people talk Japanese, not seeing them interact with objects that they might be naming.
Absolute gibberish if you've got no context.
Yes. And so it's probably the same with music.
Yep.
All right, so there is an extreme of originality then that probably goes too far for people to understand and comprehend music, and it wouldn't be engaging or pleasurable at that point. So we've got an extreme end of originality where there's absolutely none. I.e., you're listening to a piece of music that you've heard before, and well, I guess you could be listening to that piece of music that you've heard before, but that piece of music is entirely original from when it was written. But I mean, putting that aside for now, you can listen to music that you've heard before. You can listen to music that has very slim amounts of originality, but is basically ripping off something you have heard before. And that all sits in what we might call the comfort zone down here. And then there's somewhere in the middle where there's there's some originality, and then you've got the far end, which is so far off the chain that it's incomprehensible to you. So there are limits. But there is a point at which we do say, putting that end aside, that there is some originality that we do like, more than just ripping off some other band.
Yes.
So what is it and where is it? Where does it become too much? And why do we want this kind of original? And I suppose there's got to be people who are more into originality than others, as we've sort of discussed.
Yeah.
Is there are you the kind of person that values it more than the average person? Would you say? Is that a trait of metalheads generally? Maybe.
I don't know if we think about it enough. And like metalheads is a fairly generalized expression as well, because we're not all the same.
No.
That's a hard question. I guess it's completely subjective.
Yeah.
For me, like I enjoy some originality, but not so much that it's just fallen off a cliff.
Yeah.
It's got to have some grounding factor.
Well, okay, you can trace it, I guess. There are some bands that you might like because they change, and there are some bands that you might like despite the fact that they don't change. And there are, of course, some bands
in spite of the fact they don't change.
Yeah, or there are some bands that you've... I suppose you might have listened to, and because they don't change, you don't keep buying their records. There's nothing new in it for you.
Of any value.
But at the same time, there are bands that have changed too much, and then you don't like that stuff either. So there's got to be some balancing act going on there. I mean, personally, if I know that a band is the kind of band to release the same album more or less over and over again, I actually value the one album of theirs that I have, and I'll listen to that multiple times rather than just go and listen to their new material, as it were. Generally, if I'm going to stick with a band and keep buying their albums, it's got to be because they're doing the evolving thing. See, I spoke about that 3 kinds of originality. The evolution thing I think is important to me, but I'm wondering if that's just that I want to hear something original each time, something that I haven't heard before, rather than hear them do something that they haven't done before.
Right.
Because I know that there have been metal bands. I can't remember who it was, but I remember at some point a metal band decided they were just going to release an AC/DC album. They covered that album front to back, whatever AC/DC album it was, just in their metal style. So and that was, everyone was expecting a new LP from this band, and they
just did out an AC/DC album. Written by AC/DC.
Yes.
Originally recorded by AC/DC.
But performed by us, whoever it is.
Whoever that was.
And it doesn't feel like, oh, you've done a cover to generate some interest here. You've done a whole album of of one band doing one album. It's like, so I guess that does happen with bands. In which case it's something totally unoriginal, even though it's a new album. But that seems to be a rarity.
Is there originality in doing that in your own style?
Well, I suppose if it's often not done that way, doing it once turns heads. Look,
Like
we're
if it
talking
was-
about it now. If I could remember who they were, it might have been worth it for them, but I can't.
Yeah.
So, but maybe I can look it up later.
Carcass. I don't know. But if they did it, for example,
If they had
that would
done
be
it,
weird.
would it be considered avant-garde to just rip someone off? But you know, I guess it's not ripping off. They're saying who it is. They're saying yes, it's the same album. We're just you know we're doing it.
Yeah, there's other examples of bands that you know, have like a B-side where they're just playing, or they've written and recorded songs in a style of another band, but a mashup. The example I got was a B-side on an Amon Amarth record. Might have been Deceiver of the Gods,
Right.
but they had like a 4-track B-side where they wrote songs in the style of, there was an AC/DC song.
Yeah, okay.
It's not an AC/DC song, it's a Amon Amarth original song.
Right.
But written
As if it
in
was.
the style of, like, as if it was an AC/DC song they were covering, but it was their song.
Now you remind me of this band Beatallica. You know.
Oh
these guys?
man, I love Beatallica. Mashups are a whole different episode. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a YouTube guy who does mashups really well too, but he's not performing it himself. He's just cutting it up and gluing it together.
Oh yeah, that's the thing too.
What's his name? Like Bill McClintock or something like that.
Okay, I don't know.
Fantastic. Find that, chuck it in the comments for people to look at. It's so good. Anyway, the Amon Amarth one, they did AC/DC. I think they did Motorhead and Judas Priest.
All right. I haven't heard this.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty cool.
This B-side set of theirs.
If you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to listen to. Yeah.
There's heaps of different examples of people, like, you know, copying or paying homage or whatever. It's good fun. I think it's rife in metal for all different reasons, but originality is something that is thin on the ground.
Well, I think here's the thing. Like we discussed when we said, you know, Opeth released Deliverance and Damnation so that everyone can have both. I think if your favorite metal band just started doing covers and that didn't release any new material, you'd be like...
that would be disappointing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's okay to have those things, and they're a novelty, and they're actually cool when we hear them.
So long as it's not the only thing they're doing.
Yes. So we still value originality from those artists at least in more of a degree than cover songs would provide.
What about a long established band that's just released an album that's just paying homage to itself? You know, like the new Star Wars movies.
Okay, yeah.
Episode 7 came out, and it's just like, this is just a tribute to Star Wars.
Yeah. Remix.
That's what the latest Tool record was.
Okay.
This is just like, this is a tribute to Tool.
Yeah,
by Tool.
Okay. So I haven't listened to anything post Lateralis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not even 10,000 Days.
Not even 10,000 Days.
Oh my God.
I think Lateralis was pretty formative for me, but it opened my eyes to a huge range of more music, and I got lost in all of that.
Yep, right? And you left Tool behind.
Yeah, essentially.
Oh man, yeah. Find another bottle of good red wine and sit down and listen to 10,000 Days. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I will give it a shot. Do I have
time.
to get the version of it that comes with the glasses or whatever the heck was going on with that? Or
you know, if you like, it's a bit of fun. That's all that is. It's just a bit of fun.
Okay.
It's not necessary.
Didn't really know what was going on there.
Yeah, it's just the artwork in the packaging that looks cool when you look at it through those goggles.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I'll lend it to you. It's cool.
Okay,
It's a
you got
good
that
bit
version,
of fun.
that edition. Yeah. Okay, but you reckon their latest album is more like a best of
Star Wars Episode 7.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like you've heard it. Like you're hearing it, and you know full well, logically, you've never heard this before.
Yep.
And it's new content, and then you can't help but think like, I've heard all this before.
It's like deja vu.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't get me wrong, it's good.
Yeah.
But it has a sense of like you've heard it before. Hey, we've got Jason on board.
Opeth became a Steve Wilson tribute band. Get out of here. What was the album that Steven Wilson and Mikhail Ockerfeld did together?
Storm Corrosion.
Storm Corrosion, right? They were kind of like, isn't Storm Corrosion just going to be like Heritage or vice versa?
No.
And they're just like, why would they do Heritage when they're doing this mashup and whatever? But it turned out to be way different than either of those people's creative output. It was not previously.
I guess you could draw similarities in parts of Storm Corrosion that were this, similar to Opeth style and similar to stuff that Porcupine Tree had done.
Yeah. in snippets of those other bands, I suppose.
Yeah, it was its own thing, definitely.
Yeah, I hard disagree. I don't think Opeth are a Steve Wilson tribute band. But yes, going the prog route is, it is possible that they were wearing some of their influences more on their sleeves in their prog era than they were in their metal era. But
for sure.
Yeah. But then again, I guess it might be their metal influences they lost and their prog influences are shining. I don't know. That's
I feel like, while there was the prog influence in a lot of their back catalogue while they were, doing death metal, to take away the death metal to leave the prog that was behind, like that was already there, it's not the same as the stuff they're doing now. It doesn't, you take the metal away, it doesn't just leave you with heritage. It would leave you with some like noodly folk music. It's not. Oh,
yeah. So,
it has changed.
If we snipped out all of the non-metal parts of all the previous Opeth albums and trying to stitch them together into a song, it wouldn't just sound like heritage.
Correct. Correct is like a 70s prog rock album. But it's got heavy riffs. Some of it is heavy.
Yeah.
It's not brutal.
Oh, yeah.
But it's heavy.
Certainly, I think parts of Sorceress are heavier than any 70s prog rock band ever did. Like Dream Theater, sort of an influence of mine, and listening to all the stuff there. When I discovered this band, because prog draws from a large range of influences, heaps of it was original to me, that local originality, let's say, where I hadn't heard any music like any of this stuff, and there was quite a lot of originality that I had to absorb from this band. But when I went back and started exploring prog rock and their influences, you realize, whoa, that's just Genesis. They ripped off Genesis. But obviously they're synthesizing it with metal in a way that is got that originality, of course. When you discover it's not as original as it seems when you first hear it, I don't know, there's kind of an awakening there. Maybe it feels like it cheapens it sometimes. I think for the most part, if they're doing a good job and they're not expressly trying to play it off that they are ripping, that it's their original material and then ripping off and so on and so on. It seems in good faith.
And they can own it in their own right.
And it's still enjoyable. It's when you hear something and then you find out that it is one of those plagiarism cases where they've tried to pass it off as their own. I think that's when you can be disappointed that you've heard it that way. But one thing I also think about is, as far as the local originality goes, there's a breadth of bands that are all kind of sounding the same, influenced by this or that. And if you discover this particular band first, then the originality of that for you sticks out in your mind with that one act. And then you discover that, that exact same feeling can happen to someone else, and they can enjoy the exact same thing about the music as you do, but for a different band. And and they're just like, oh, you like that? It's cool, but it's kind of derivative. You should listen to this. And then you listen to it and you're like, what? That's the same thing. That one's the derivative one. Or then you have an argument over who came first, and then it turns out that it's so muddled up that you can't really tell where one thing ends and one thing begins. But that local originality for you becomes an important place. And I think there are albums for me where they're my classic. They're my classic of that, they're my, Blaze in the Northern Sky of Darkthrone, but it's not Darkthrone, it's some other band that I heard first doing that thing. And everyone's like, oh, they love this one. So in some way, I think it's the case that maybe in the old days, when a band became really popular, that effect can happen for a lot of people with one band. But perhaps nowadays, when there's, I think, more music just being released and more bands doing, I guess, probably the same thing as each other and so on, then it's more likely that everyone's going to have a different version of that emotional impact that they have from the originality of something that they've heard. The reason I wanted to talk about originality somewhat was because as far as evolution goes, I've mentioned that I want to try and put one unique thing into each song. That is not the case that I'm trying to come up with something truly original. And I don't even think I'm really trying to come up with something that's original, locally original, for the person that's listening. It's more like original for us.
Something different for you, unique from song to song.
Yes. And I don't feel like I've really done anything original in the Loom of Time's music, unless it counts that mixing things that have already come before in a way that hasn't been done before counts as original. And I'm not sure that it does. It's hard to truly tell whether that's the case. But in any case, at least I have this originality baked into this thing where I try to do something different. I guess it's, trying to measure exactly how different it has to be or what unique thing counts is pretty subjective.
Yeah. But where to pull it up before it falls off the cliff.
Yeah. We're up to Shoulders of the Giants, and as I go through each song, I have to think about, what's the thing that stands out here. And often it has been the case that I can say, oh, well, this guest person was on this song that I haven't played on anything, but I don't think this one has this guest song. And I think this song, Shoulders of Giants, has been through revisions where it actually had more original stuff in it than it has now.
Yep.
And I deleted it. Now, I actually found an old demo that I had of a previous version of this song. I didn't know if any existed, but I found it. I had to listen to it today. And I go, oh, that's what I remember. Now I've spent so long with this version of it that it's how it is, and I can't imagine it anyway. But now I've heard that other version again. I'm like,
it all comes back.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I do totally understand why I deleted all that stuff that I did and rewrote it. Right, first up, this is an old song, right? It came off of the Nihilreich era days, but we didn't have time to put it onto Nihilreich, and I didn't feel it was really finished.
Not ready.
So it underwent some revisions to bring it more in line with the new material. But that's basically
harassed it a bit.
Harassed it. Into place, and I think more or less the beginning of the song is the same, and more or less the end of the song is the same, but there's a chunk in the middle that became different. Now, you did hear an old version of it, I think. Do you recall anything about that from it? Or you said you remembered that it was different than you remembered it, as it were.
Yes.
But you couldn't pick out why that was. It was just seems like it.
The Grand False Karass version is a lot less Nihilreich. And the version I remember was very Nihilreich. But that's given that I'd only heard it live on stage. Where you were just typically playing Nihilreich material. So it was all bashed together, and in the moment, or in the few, couple of different times I'd seen it, that was just classic Loom of Time. Now that has shifted somewhat with this new record. The version of it now fits in with that, and it deviates from that classic Loom of Time style in the middle of the song.
In the middle of the song. Yeah. So, I think it begins pretty death metal-y. It's got quite a strong death metal intro. And then it goes into, I'd say, probably classic Loom of Time sounding stuff. And then the part where it deviates is the part where you were involved in the gang vocals stuff. We did some melodic choir type singing over what is a sort of a proggier, spacier kind of section. I think it's got a guitar solo. It's quite melodic, and then it goes back into some death metal, and then goes on to finish the song in what you might call classic Loom of Time style again. But that middle section, the part that you were involved with, this spacier section, it was a lot longer. Now that I've remembered what it was like after I listened to this little demo, it had a quite funky bass solo where the guitars cut out, and it just the bass and the drums grooved, and then the part where we do those choir vocals, it basically drops out to nothing except clean guitars and a single vocal line delivering those lyrics, and then it has to find a way to build back up, and then it plays some riffs, and then it goes into the song that we now know.
Is that how it was when you did it live?
I probably couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
it would have had to have been similar to that. I think it must have been.
Need to find footage of that.
Oh, surely that might exist. Footage. Yeah, it might exist. The coming down to this clean tone and single vocal line and no drums and building back up and doing riffs and stuff, it just cut the momentum out of the song, like totally killed it. And coming back in, it just it felt laborious. Right. So I snipped all that out, and I tried to find a way to make it flow better. And I think maybe that is a bit more of the hallmark of the modern sound, is that it doesn't stop and start so much. It finds a way to flow through. And that's I guess we found that. Now I should mention actually, there's we might need to give Mitta an arrangement credit, because there was a section where there was a transition, basically. I couldn't work out how to do it. And even up to the very last day of the studio, I wasn't really happy with it. It's just like this, just before the clean vocals come in, it's like this. Right, that had a couple of bars in the middle of it. Is like and then a drum fill, and then it and then it comes in.
Oh, and you got rid of all that.
It was Mitta. I'm like, how long should this little fill go for? Should we let the drums shine for longer? Should it just be one bar? And Mitta's just like, snip, snip, slapped it together, gone, and it still flowed. And I was like, oh, that works.
Wow.
I didn't realize that would work. Somehow, for whatever reason, I thought it would need a transition between these two sections, but it did not. They fit together. So arrangement credit to Mitta for that one, for snipping a bar or whatever from the song. But yes, I think we made it flow a lot better, and I think by not bringing it all the way down, even though that's not perhaps as dynamic, it kept the momentum of the song. And this song, functionally on the album, I felt needed to be a place where it kept the momentum of the album going. That's how it was, I think, conceived for Nihil Rakan, and that's how I wanted to use it here for the same reason. But the proggy sort of section, just to sort of bring it back, but not all the way back. I just kind of had some chords and some melodies and the way they are. The clean guitars that I had in there, Scott pointed out, he's like, wow, it's kind of Pink Floyd-ish, isn't it? this section. I'm like, is it? But then when I got over the fact that I might have been ripping off Pink Floyd, I'm like, yeah, we should make it Pink Floyd-ish. So I'm like, yes, let's really lean into it. So I pulled out the phaser and the telecaster that they had in the studio and leaned into it.
The telly is in the Studio Diary video.
It would be for this part, I'd say.
I remember seeing it in the video going, doesn't own a telly. Going on there.
No, I do not. That was, I guess, the nice thing about going to a studio that has all this gear lying around is that I can
grab it
at a whim and just do it as we please. And so, for a couple of guitar solos, we used some Stratocaster that they had lying around. So for quieter or more melodic lines, the Strat was there, but for this clean tones with phases, we pulled out the telly. One thing I didn't mention in the Depths of Hell itself episode that we did was that the guitar we used for the Necro Sound section was just a trashed old Les Paul. But it wasn't a Les Paul. It was an Ibanez. It looked like a Les Paul. Before Ibanez got sued for looking like a Les Paul. Right. So they don't make those anymore, and they're not allowed to.
But there is one.
But there's in the time that they were making them, there's a couple around, and there's one of those at Tommy Rock in Newcastle. Like it had been sitting on the shelf for years, probably without a string change. And because it was for the Necro section, I was like,
you have to not change the strings. Don't even clean the dust off it.
Yes, we did exactly that.
Nice.
And Mitta was like, are you sure about this, man? And I played the string, and it just like fret buzz and out of tune and intonation
nothing more
terrible.
sure.
Yes, exactly. So the telly got used in this section to make it more Pink Floydy and all those effects and everything. And I think even the gang vocals are kind of like almost The Wall style.
Man, it's a song. Like when I got familiar with this record and this version of this song, I thought to myself, this part is so familiar, like it's paying homage to something so hard. And it took me a while to pick up what it was, but then I was like, it's Pink Floyd. I'm glad you brought it up because I was gonna. Okay. Especially after the start of this conversation was all about paying homage and being original. I was like, we got to talk about Pink Floyd in this episode.
And thank goodness, I realized, and that you weren't like, it sounds like Pink Floyd, and I'm like, what?
Oh no, Mitta, pull the plug. It's too late.
Cease and desist from Pink Floyd.
But it is like a specific Pink Floyd song even.
Yeah, I think it's like from there's a couple of parts on I think on the wall. They have almost the kids choir on there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was a nice thing that we could have as a unique part of this song, right?
Don't get me wrong, I love it. I'm not saying like they're just copying Pink Floyd as done 40 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Matt ran out of ideas.
Yeah. Not at all, man.
Quick, we need something quick. Pick up.
It's really good.
No, I had written something that. I think it was just generically melodic, but Scott noticed a Pink Floyd-y attitude there, and so we leaned into it.
Yeah, good.
And I think it works.
Yeah.
And it's the lead guitar through there. I'm actually quite proud of the melodic lines I took there, but it's almost too subtle to hear it. There's quite a lot going on there. Like there's multiple rhythm guitars, all the choir stuff, and the effects on all the guitars. So it's surprisingly busy for how open it sounds compared to the rest of the song. But yeah, after that we go into a lead part which was in my original vision for the song. So there's a piece, a nugget there in the middle that actually survived the purge. But after that there's quite an extended death metal section. This was a death metal-y section in my original draft, but it wasn't as brutal and it didn't flow as well, and I don't think it was over as quickly. This section that brings us back into the rest of the song has a strong melodic through line where a tremolo guitar comes in with just like this rising motif, and then everything cuts out and it's still there, and then the guitars come back in, but they're in a totally different sort of time signature, as it were. They're doing the triplet thing and it's slower, but that melodic line keeps going. So it marries those two very disparate sections together. Like you couldn't very easily go from the fast death metal riff into the slow melodic riff, but I found a melodic line that could work in either of them.
Yep.
So it was just a case of playing it once
just
during
it
one,
over the top,
and then by itself, and then bring the other one in. And that way it never feels like you're stopping and starting because something is carrying on through that entire section. The end of the song, I think, sounds particularly Nihil Reich era to me, apart from the fact that it's got quite a lot of gang vocals in it. I think the energy and the lyrical delivery and the riffs are kind of almost hardcore tinge at the end of the song. So I think it bears the hallmarks of the previous era. It's hard for me to tell how much it sounds out of place. I wasn't sure whether people would be able to tell or not, or maybe you just have to be a certain intimacy with the project to be able to tell, or whether no one could tell at all. I don't know. I think it's one of those things where you point it out and people can go, oh yeah.
I think if you never pointed it out, no one would have ever known.
Yeah, okay.
Especially in its current iteration where it's so different to what it might have been before. It more in line with what the rest of Grand False Karass has got. It fits, right? It's not out of place at all.
No, okay, yeah.
And if you did tell someone that, this is a song from Nihil Reich and we changed it up, and it's like, oh yeah, interesting to hear the other version. Cool. Sadly, when I made the demos in the Nihil Reich era, I had very poor production skills, so it sounds a lot more necro. I can make better demos now, but either way, maybe I'll post up that old version of it now that this one's out and the dust has settled, as it were. But it's not a B-side. It's just it's a oddity, a true something you can have a look at if it interests you. It's like a sideshow. I'll talk about the lyrics now, because that's one of the ways that I think it more feels like the old material. Oh yes.
And one of the reasons is that I think on Nihil Reich the lyrics a lot of the time were they were picking a person to be critical about, but as much as they were critical about something, they would also get to at some point the idea that we can change and we can do better, and things can be hopeful and can look up, and things, whatever. They have a positive spin on whatever negative thing we're exploring. Whereas I don't think Nihil Reich is concerned. I don't think Grand False Karass is concerned with doing that anymore. We're happy just to be miserable the entire time, right? Because the rules changed for me. My self-set rules that I was going for lyrically to have a kind of audience engagement in the way that the vocals are delivered required that in the lyrics as well. I didn't have that anymore, so I don't feel like the Grand False Karass songs have that essence to them. They don't have a "you're done bad, but we can do better" thing. They're just miserable. Yeah,
just bad. We done bad.
Yeah,
full stop.
So I think this is the most obvious place you can see that Shoulders of Giants is different, because it has quite a hopeful ending, as it were.
Yeah,
a "we can do better" attitude. But the content of the lyrics is millennials, and as a generation to which I belong, have a reputation for being lazy and entitled, and many have gone to great lengths to point out why that isn't the case, and that if there's disparity between the boomers and the millennials, it might be because of changed conditions, and we might actually be even blame the boomers for it or whatever. I'm not super concerned with any of that. But my idea was that, and this actually fits, I think, better with the concept of grand false karass, because the false karass, the idea. Did we ever go over this? I don't know if we ever talked about the name of the album. Right, all right. A karass is a what they call a neologism, a made-up word, a new word. By Kurt Vonnegut for his novel. It comes from some religion that he created for that thing, but there was a bunch of weird words in there that he made. It's an interesting book. It's kind of satirical and funny, and but also kind of, it's depressing funny, black comedy, I would say, right? Because it's about this it explores similar themes to weapons of mass destruction and destruction of a lot of people and so on, but it does it in this interesting way. Anyway. The karass, that particular word, means something like a meaningful group of people. It's sometimes easier, I suppose, to talk about the false karass, which is a group of people that people think or feel are meaningful, but don't have a really meaningful connection. Sure. And in the book, he uses the example of people from a certain area of a city, Hoosiers or something. I can't really remember. Anyway, and so he meets someone else the character meets someone else from that part of the city, and they're like, "Oh, you're from this part of the city. You must be this kind of person." And so they're like, "Well, no, that's a false karass." And he says other things like, nations might be a false karass. And I guess the suggestion is that the things that people care about when we divide humanity up might actually not be as important as some people think they are.
Yeah. It need not be as divisive as we've made it out to be.
So, is the loom of time's way of taking something and corrupting it. We've gone the route of the grand false karass. So let's blow the joke wide open here and say that maybe humanity, as a general rule, isn't a meaningful connection with people, right? Let's expand the scope of meaningful here and say that even the human race may not be important in the grand scheme of however we measure these things. Right? Shoulders of Giants actually works well with that, because it's like saying, "Oh, you think millennials are lazy and entitled? Maybe it's not just millennials. Maybe it's all humanity." And maybe it's the case that the boomers don't appear to be lazy and entitled because they got what they felt they were entitled to, or something along those lines.
Maybe.
Anyway, again, not super important.
Yeah.
But I guess the idea is still there, is that if we're being accused of being lazy and entitled, it's possible that some of us are. It's possible that there are bad eggs and examples of whatever among us. But it's also the case that it might be our responsibility to make sure that we don't earn that reputation, that we do a good job, that we do fight for what we believe in, and that we do work hard, and all of those things, whatever it is. So it goes through a bit of a cycle. It's like, I think it starts off the song pretty pessimistic about a certain subset of people, and then by the end of it, it's saying we can group together and we can do better. So expanding the scope of the way that people criticize certain generations. It's almost like millennial is a false karass for us now. So even though I obviously came up with that name for the album long after this song was written, it does it fit well enough there that I felt that it was okay to it didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel like it ruined the
it's theme. Better than okay. It makes more sense now.
Okay. Because I remember we talked about I think it's Ghost Reveries that was going to be a concept album, but he came up with a few ideas that he didn't fit, but they were so important to him that he decided to abandon the concept album in favor of the few good ideas that he had that didn't fit. I worried that maybe we might end up with something like that, shoving in an old Loom song into a new Loom album. But as it happens, I think it kind of worked out. So there aren't any guests on this song, I would say. I don't even think, maybe even Jimmy doesn't even play on any keyboards or organs on this song. It might even have less people on it than even the normal standard Loom song on this album, whatever that one might be. But it does have unique things in it that even though the guests aren't represented in that way, that musically it does happen like that. Now that I think about it, apart from the Pink Floyd section, there is a piano on this song that there is no other piano in the entire album.
Really?
So it's actually pretty subtle. And I think in early demos, I had it a little bit louder, and Brad's like, calm down. I think he thought he accused me of ripping someone off now. I think, what's this orchestral death metal band that put out an album with a picture of a king on the cover? They're the same.
Well, the album is called King.
Yeah, that's right. Who's that? That's
Flesh God Apocalypse.
Flesh God Apocalypse, yeah. So, yes, we had quite an orchestral sounding piano. Classical sounding piano a little bit, but it's pretty subtle on the album now, so you'll blink and you'll miss it. But yes, so that's one of those little subtle spicy details where I went back and I had a riff, and it didn't have any leads over it. It didn't have any organs. It didn't have any vocals. I'm like, we need to spice this up. All right, let's get a piano. That's piano. So yes, it's a Flesh God style classical sounding piano.
Did you play that?
I did. Yes. So I can play the piano. I did a few grades on it when I was a youngster, but nowadays with the advent of MIDI, I can play something basic and then spice it up and then fiddle with it until it comes out sounding like a
click and drag.
So well,
copy paste.
Well, not so much that. It's more like actually changing things and making it less copy paste. Right?
Okay,
But manipulating it in post, as it were. Right. Even though I couldn't naturally come up with something like that by the instincts of my playing, I can make it sound like a real pianist came up with it. It just takes me a longer time than it would for a normal piano, which is actually a pretty good creative technique in the era of recorded music. And not just that, I've heard authors talking about, so I saw an author talking about creative writing, and one of the questions was, how do I write a character that's smarter than myself? Okay, and his answer was basically that one of the things that makes characters seem smart is they make connections very quickly. Well, you've got all the time in the world to make those connections, right? So you can,
while you're writing.
So you can spend a long time thinking about something, and then you can just have the character come up with it very quickly, and that way they seem very smart, even though you're not as smart as they are, because you couldn't come up with something so quickly. You can still write a character that's smart. And I think it's almost the same with music that you're not an expert in. You can put it down onto tape. It's not a tape, and then massage it and play with it and mutate it and fiddle with it until it becomes the thing that
amazing, much better than you could ever do.
Yes, off the cuff or whatever, without the expertise of whoever could do something like that in an instant. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I'm certainly going to say that because it's what I do, right? So, so the pianos was an example of this, and I think now, when you're ready to listen out for them, and you go, oh, there it is, it'll sound like, oh yeah, that sounds like a real pianist could have played that, even though no, they didn't.
Well, someone could, right?
Someone could, right? It's not like there's a scene in The Fifth Element, right, where they have an alien sing an opera. And the opera was written such that a human voice could not sing like that. And so they digitally manipulated the voice of the opera singer because they wanted something that could be not humanly possible. Now, generally in recorded music, we don't. Well, there are plenty of musics that don't mind doing stuff that's humanly impossible, but there's also a lot of music that we like to have some authenticity to, and so we don't attempt to make things as so ridiculous that a human couldn't play it. As it happens, I think a real human person,
someone has covered it,
and done the previously thought humanly impossible, right? I wonder if that drive has been part of, virtuosity in other forms of music. Like metal has a lot of virtuosos among its among the crowds of guitarists and drummers and whoever.
Oh, there's virtuosos, all sorts of musicians virtuoso in metal.
And that extremophile drive to go further and further is. I'm not an extremophile in that way, I suppose. I don't know. I'm just more of a remixer, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, that's all right.
I enjoy being creative, right? It's fun to come up with... it's almost like a song is a puzzle or a problem, and it's fun to come up with ways to solve the problem, ways to get it to flow, pieces that will fit in that didn't exist before. And
what if there was a way, that technique that you were using for that piano part, it could be played by someone but not by you, so you play a little bit and then muck around with it on the computer until it sounds good, sounds like someone could play it. Could you then learn it after the fact?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I think it might be more common that people write in this way. I'm sure I've heard Vaughan actually speak about writing some of the music that he writes at a computer where he's nowhere near a guitar.
Yeah.
Right? He might have to massage it into
He's
reality.
just tabbing it out on the screen.
Yeah. So it can often be the case that he might be able to write something that he couldn't play.
Because tabbing it in Guitar Pro, then you can press play and hear what it sounds like, make little corrections here and there, and then see it on the screen, and then read it, hear it, become familiar with it, play it.
But when he first picks up the guitar, he might not be able to play it, even though he's written it, but he can learn it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I think in the case of the piano part that I wrote, yes, I think someone could play it. Maybe even me, if I could practice it. But I'm not super interested in doing that right now. I don't think there's much utility in me learning that little piece at the moment.
You might be able to expand on it for the live show and make it more prominent and do the whole Flesh God thing that Brad doesn't want to do.
Yeah. Well, one thing I thought about was the bass solo that we had in the original version of the song, this funky drum and bass section. We could probably inject that back in there for the live show.
Why not?
But I always remind myself that there's a reason that I took it out. So at the same time, maybe not. We'll be starting our rehearsals for live in about a month, I would say, something like that.
Yep.
Speaking of which, since the last time I spoke to you, has Evocatus had a rehearsal since?
No.
No? Okay. So.
Oh, man. When was the last rehearsal? It was a month ago.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe, at least 3 weeks ago.
I suppose you finalised your set list for your...
Oh, that's easy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a repertoire that we keep current of maybe 7 or maybe 8 songs.
Yep.
And more often than not, whatever set we're playing has got 5 songs. Okay. And there'll be definite ones, and then there'll be maybe ones that we swap in and out from time to time.
Yep. And some songs you play half of because they're too long. And
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Like we've even done that recently. I think we played a show in Sydney where we had to play for 50 minutes. So we played that song.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think we played the full version.
Yeah. Okay. If you've got 50 minutes, I suppose you can afford to.
50 minutes.
How long is your set for your big Hailstorm gig?
I don't even have a worksheet for that yet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Chase that up, actually.
Mystery.
Yeah.
Could be another 50 minutes.
Oh, man. I doubt it. I don't know that would be good practice for a show like that.
No,
People would lose interest for the opening band.
Even for the headlining band, there's a certain set length that gets a little too long for people to hold their attention for anything, It's like
that's right.
James Cameron is releasing, a 3-hour Avatar movie or something, and people are complaining that that's too long. And he's just like... But you're all going to watch it at home. Just pause and go to the toilet. It's fine. You're allowed to do that now,
Yep.
That being said, I don't really want to make long albums. It's not because I want to pump them out so often, that I want to keep them short. But I do feel like the Loom of Time's music in particular might be fatiguing because of the density of changes and so on. It's demanding and so on. I think, there might be people like yourself that are more open to that kind of project and know what we're going for and be open to that kind of thing. Maybe most people, it's a stretch.
Yeah, perhaps not.
Yeah. I don't know, but I got this intuition that with the Loom of Time's music, sometimes the songs can feel longer than they are. Now, most of the time when people say, time flies when you're having fun, something feeling like it's longer than it is a negative thing. I think in this case, I feel like that way. I think it's more of a density of stuff in there. It feels longer than it is because you've got you've had so much stuff in a short mud cake or something.
Yeah, you can only have so much mud cake, right?
Yeah, that's right. Wait, sometimes it's way better for something to feel longer than it is.
Oh, that is a different episode, definitely.
Yeah, we'll leave you with that.
Stay for YouTube.
Thanks for your input on that, Jason. But no, thank you very much actually for hanging out again. Hey!